Welcome once again to Along the Rio Grande. I'm George Torok, and today we're going to be speaking with Mr. Gary Williams from the El Paso Community Foundation. Mr. Williams is the coordinator of the Paso of the North Heritage Corridor. He's going to tell us a lot about the potential for heritage tourism in the El Paso area, tell us a little bit about the foundation, and talk about some of the many different projects that are underway. Gary, welcome to Along the Rio Grande.
Thank you, George.
Maybe we could start by talking a little bit about what the El Paso Community Foundation is.
The El Paso Community Foundation was founded in 1977 as a tax-exempt nonprofit institution that's dedicated primarily to serving as a institution that can manage contributions in a long-term endowment basis for the benefit of the El Paso area.
And who exactly is involved in the foundation?
Well, we have a board of directors and a small staff that provides really a direction in three areas: donor services, linking donors to needs in the community, and providing, as I said, that long-term endowment opportunity through the foundation. Secondly, in terms of grant-making opportunities, the staff and board serve to work with looking at requests for funding that come to the foundation and then making those allocations across the board to health agencies, social services agencies, educational institutions, the arts community, and to the nonprofit community in general.
What kind of sources of funding are we looking at? What kinds of sources are out there?
The sources of funding range from individuals to businesses and folks that are able to see the bigger picture for the community, the need to dedicate a portion of what they've had come their way to the long-term benefit of the El Paso community. So it could range from large donors that might, as Carlo Weiler Sr. did several years ago, provide a television station, KTSM, Channel 9, and 2 radio stations, to someone that may be giving $5 a month or $10 a month, whatever their heart says to them to do. We accept all donations, large and small. They all benefit the El Paso community.
What kind of projects has the foundation been involved in over the years? What types of things do they take on?
Over the 21 years we've been around, we've been involved in a lot of projects that pull partners together to work collaboratively towards needs in the community. Most recently, we've been involved in a waterworks project that uses the different agencies and institutions that are involved in water hookups in the colonias, and we facilitated work wherein through Waterworks, which is a nonprofit that has a connection to the foundation, where their difference is that it's a collaborative, but it also uses the residents to be involved in their own benefits, so to speak, through sweat equity. We have been involved in facilitating a collaborative with the State of Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, wherein they acquired the tramway, the Channel 9 KTSM tramway, which we're now calling the Carlo Weiler Sr. Observatory. And the Weiler Observatory, through a partnership with our legislative delegation from El Paso Parks and Wildlife, has now been acquired by Parks and Wildlife and will be operated for the benefit of all El Pasoans as the 4th section of Parks and Wildlife parks in this area. So we played a primary role in facilitating that through a number of partners.
And how did you become involved with the foundation? What's your background?
Well, I was actually a recipient of their grant making through my directorship at the El Paso Rehabilitation Center and my work with children with disabilities. And so when you operate a nonprofit, you're always out looking for resources to fund your services. And so over the 11 years I was at the El Paso Rehab Center, I developed a relationship with the foundation and learned a lot about it and was ready to make a change, and so moved over there last year when they initiated the Paso of the North Heritage Corridor project.
Let's talk a little bit about that project. What is a heritage corridor? What does that mean?
Well, you know, heritage corridor is a concept that involves a place, and in this occasion the place is southern New Mexico, specifically the Mesilla Valley and Las Cruces, El Paso and Hudspeth counties, and Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. So ours is a binational three-state corridor that occupies a 150-mile section of the river and encompasses three states and two countries. So it's a geographic place, but it's also, and perhaps more importantly, a process of building partnerships and collaboration with the end result of linking an area or region's cultural, natural, and historical resources together so that all of the wonderful people and institutions that are out doing heritage work, historic work, natural preservation work, etc., are able to link those to tell tourists and residents alike this wonderful story of the Pass of the North. And so that, in a nutshell, is what we're trying to do, is bring those linkages together and better tell our story to not just tourists or visitors, but perhaps more importantly, residents, especially families. The outcomes for a heritage corridor pretty much are across the board. They range from, you're looking at tangible outcomes in heritage tourism, economic revitalization, historic preservation, natural conservation of natural areas, recreational opportunities, and perhaps public education is a key one. And then perhaps lastly, but maybe most importantly, helping to facilitate a better sense in pride of place so that people understand their heritage, how rich it is, and through that and through doing different projects in partnership with the community, developing a greater sense of pride in this place, especially among children and the young people that live here.
How does a heritage corridor become designated? What's the process? Who designates?
Well, they're done east of the Mississippi. The National Park Service and the federal government can be involved in designations of heritage regions, and they also can be done west of the Mississippi by the National Park Service. So at one level you have the federal government, but most of them designated by National Park Service are east of the Mississippi. But they can be done locally, as we've done. They can be done at a state level, they could be done at a national level, and they can be done just about any way a local community wants to do it. Ours is a local initiative with a partnership with Texas Historical Commission and the Hewlett Foundation out of Palo Alto, California, and our own El Paso Community Foundation have pooled our resources and got this project off the ground last June of '98.
And what's unique about our area? Why is it different maybe from other heritage corridors?
Well, it's unique in that it straddles the U.S.-Mexico border. I think all of us pretty much understand the uniqueness of the El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, Las Cruces area in terms of its cultural heritage being on the border, and as I understand it, the largest community on an international border anywhere on the planet. So we have some unique features here, and those need to be told in a way that common story, that common heritage across the river is told to visitors and residents alike. But it is truly a unique area in the country, and I think on the planet.
You're coordinator of the project. What's involved? What are the first steps that have been taken? What types of activities?
Well, we started with an inventory, and we developed a baseline inventory of cultural, natural, and historical resources in our region, Las Cruces, Mesilla Valley, Juarez, and El Paso. And from that, began to do some mapping work so that we had an inventory of what institutions are serving what mission, where our historical markers are, what condition they're in, where the monuments are, what condition they're in, and begin to look at not just the physical side, markers and monuments and museums, but also looking at our cultural events as well and where those are at, and to put these together in one place, ultimately to develop a web page and a brochure that residents and tourists can pick up that will have a map of the sites, significant sites, have a map that will include cultural events and museums and other historical resources that people might want to look at.
Is this something unusual to be working with two states and to be working with two countries? Is our heritage corridor different than the other ones that have been developed?
The one closest to us is actually downriver. It was started in a partnership between the Texas Historical Commission and local residents of the communities between Brownsville, Texas, on the Gulf of Mexico on the river, going upriver to Laredo. It's a 250-mile section, binational, multi-county, that was developed between the U.S. and Mexico through Texas Historical Commission, the Meadows Foundation, over about a 6-year period. But it's still evolving. Meadows came in, the foundation, with Texas Historical Commission, partnered with the local communities, developed a brochure, a web page, and then are working today, 6 or 7 years later, to develop their resources together so that when people go to those local communities, there's a museum with appropriate exhibits telling the story of that community. So it's kind of a multi-layer and level approach that happens over a long period of time. This is not something that anybody's going to do in 12 months, and we're not in it for a short period. We're in it for the long term because that's what is going to be required to develop this properly.
Once the inventory was put together, where did we go from there? What activities are underway?
I work with a lot of organizations in the community, some grassroots, some that have been around a long time, some just starting. And what I try to do is work with each and every one of them that I can to link what they're trying to do to this larger concept and to facilitate what they're trying to do through whatever technical assistance that I can provide, whatever grants I'm aware of outside of El Paso and here in El Paso, and what other resources and ideas I can bring to their good efforts. So it's really a collaborative partnership that's developed from in the Lower Valley to the Mission Trail Association and to all of the partners that are involved in the restoration of the Socorro Mission, for example, and in enhancing what we do with the San Elizario Historical and Genealogical Society with what they do at Los Portales, and then moving upriver to working with the Keystone Group and looking at securing funding for acquisition of the acreage at the Keystone Wetland and Archaeological Complex that's off of Doniphan, to working with the City of El Paso and UTEP on the restoration and relocation of Old Engine Number 1, hike and bike trails along the river corridor, and the tramway, of course, the Weiler Observatory, and
so
a lot of other.
We're talking about educational institutions,
right.
We're talking about businesses, we're talking about volunteer organizations,
Exactly.
We're talking about a great cross-section of agencies of one type or another that you're helping to coordinate. Let's talk about some of the projects or some of the sites in our area. Where's the greatest potential? What types of things can we really build on in the El Paso area?
Well, I think right now the timing is good for two in particular. Back in July of 1998, the President designated the Rio Grande as one of 14 American heritage rivers. And it doesn't come with any funding from the federal government. What it does is recognizes the Rio Grande as a significant and important resource for this country. And what they've done is established a way to try to connect the federal and state resources through an organization called CoRio. And what we've done is come together around the river and have looked at different potential projects from river corridor that will consist of hike and bike trails and revegetation of some of the levees as appropriate as we work with the different partners on that to create recreational opportunities along the river from the lower valley up toward the state line. So the river, to answer your question, is one opportunity that's simply there. It needs a lot of work, but there's a tremendous amount of potential if we plan together and work together on the different potential that it represents. The other one that's come about over the last 5 or 6 years is Congress is looking at designated the Camino Real that ran from Mexico City to San Juan Pueblo outside of Santa Fe as a National Historic Trail, which would be akin to what they've done with the Santa Fe Trail, the Oregon Trail, Trail of Tears, etc. And that's pending in Congress. Congressman Reyes introduced the bill in the House. It's fine in the House. We're working on the Senate side to get that passed. In the meantime, we've begun to work with New Mexico to look at the section from El Paso to New Mexico, and also working with Mexico to look together as to how we can plan its interpretation, and then when the National Park Service becomes involved, to work directly with them in a partnership to develop the wayside exhibits and the signage and the things that will interpret the Camino Real and its 42 miles in El Paso County to the public. It served as the gateway for Oñate's expedition into the United States in 1598. At that time, it was
served as really a highway for
yes,
hundreds of years.
absolutely.
In a sense. This is how people moved up and
Still
down
do.
that area. Still
do. It's a living highway, and it needs that recognition.
Went directly through the El Paso
Mission Trail, right,
Mission
through
Trail
Juarez, and across the river below La Hacienda Restaurant and Hart's Mill, and then up the east side of the Rio Grande, essentially up to Santa Fe. So that provides an opportunity to link our history and our heritage to that designation, and to partner with the different federal, state, local players that are involved in that in a way that tourists and residents begin to appreciate its significance to this region. I wanted to mention one other thing on projects after we did the inventory. I'm involved in this project with some partners. Our principal investigator is Dr. Oscar Martinez, who was at UTEP for a long time, is now at the University of Arizona. And Oscar is developing in collaboration with this project some public education booklets that we are now providing to workshops, to teachers in the area, and to others that are doing those sorts of projects like the Americana Museum. So we've created the first booklet through Oscar's efforts and the efforts of the Pass of the North, called The Creation of the U.S.-Mexico Border at the Pass of the North. And we have a booklet as well as a museum exhibit that's moving throughout the area. We've also commissioned 2 other booklets to be done, one on Native Americans. And so we are going to create, hopefully, a series of booklets that we hope will facilitate the educational aspect of young people learning about this area.
So part of this is to develop sites and develop areas,
right,
and part of it is also to let people know what's already there,
exactly,
or what's already underway.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the maybe lesser-known sites in our areas that have some potential or might be of interest to people? We know the mission sites, of course, and the river. What other things are out there?
Well, the county has, through the auspices of the Texas Historical Commission, George, a program where Texas designates historical sites through a markers program. We have about 127 markers in the county. People will see them on roadways and at mission churches in downtown. Those are sites that are always not well known or understood, and people don't always take the time to stop and read all 127. So one of the things we want to do is to put together, in partnership with the Convention and Visitor Bureau, a series of marker guidebooks to this region. So for example, we'll develop one for downtown where there's about 30 markers. There's also 14 Henry Trost designed buildings in the downtown area that are on the National Register of Historic Places. Only a few of those have historic markers, but there's a story behind each of those buildings. Many of them are very beautiful. We're talking Mills Building, Cortez Building, Bassett Tower, the old Hilton Hotel, which is now the Plaza Hotel, etc. So part of what we'll do is develop a text, a booklet with maps guiding tourists and residents to some of these lesser-known sites that have markers and some that do not. And we'll do one for the downtown, one for Lower Valley to start with, and then one in conjunction with the tourism officials in Juarez that will include a lot of lesser-known sites in the Juarez area. And we'll map those, and this is the Benito Juarez Park and some of the Chamizal Monument that's on their their Chamical Park, etc. And part of that will have a walking tour that'll start at the Santa Fe Bridge and go to the History Museum in downtown Juarez, over to the Guadalupe Mission, and to some of the lesser-known sites behind the Customs House building, over to Benito Juarez Park, and then back. And so in an effort to make people more aware of what's on both sides, either some of the initiatives that we're trying to do to point out the richness of our heritage here, and to some of the lesser-known sites that usually are not pointed out because there's no information that's really developed about how to get there.
What kinds of things are out in the county, further out? I understand there's a CCC camp that has some potential.
Right, yeah. Down off of Rio Vista Road is the Rio Vista Farm, what's called Rio Vista Farm Historic District, which is on the National Register of Historic Places, and is an extant, standing, a lot of the buildings need work. It was originally developed in the 1930s through the Works Progress Administration as a Civilian Conservation Corps camp. It also, across the street, there was a Depression-era welfare facility that was run by the county, so it's sort of a joint venture there in the 30s during the Great Depression. That area later, that camp was later used by, from the 60s, and I don't know when the Braceto program ended, by the national program to have farm workers come in from Mexico, and so it has an incredible legacy for this community in terms of how it has served this community. And right now the city of Socorro is leasing it from the county, and they're using it as a community center. We have a city-county nutrition program for the elderly there. There is a Boys and Girls Club program site there. I believe community college may be involved with a program there and provide some of the managerial direction in partnership with community college. So it's turning into a wonderful restored jewel. These are about 12 California mission-style adobe buildings, and they're being restored basically one at a time, and then being used as a community store. But it's a great place and a great story.
I'm not familiar with any CC camps that are restored and developed. This is rather rare, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is. And we've made some connections to a effort to recognize the CCC. There's a national program now being administered out of Santa Fe, and we've made some connection with them, and I've shared this information with them. Back when CCC was operating in the Depression, we were part of the New Mexico region, and so we want to partner with them as we begin to tell this story. And I'm not aware of another camp nearby that is still in this condition and still restorable as all of these buildings are. It's a wonderful place.
So there's a lot of very unique and very different types of sites in the area. What's the long-range potential for this type of development? What's the possible economic impact of these projects?
Well, as I mentioned, you have an obvious heritage tourism industry that's building as part of what's happening with tourism. And tourism is, I think, the world's largest industry. There's literally billions of dollars involved. If you can get tourists to stay a day longer, which is a goal of everybody here in El Paso, it's absolutely going to have a direct economic benefit to the community. There's an historic preservation component to this, that if we can restore places like Rio Vista Historic District, restore some of our downtown buildings, restore some of our monuments, this obviously has a payoff because historic preservation lends itself to greater tourism. If the places are fixed up and interpreted, people are going to appreciate and enjoy them more, and it both leads to not just economic revitalization or greater tourism, but as I said earlier, a pride in the place that we all live. And so there's an obvious payoff. Some of it's tangible, some of it may not be as tangible, but we all know when we feel good when something is restored and looking better, and we develop that sense that we need to respect our heritage and take care of what we do have, and we have a lot.
And we're talking about bringing people into areas that they normally wouldn't visit, not necessarily El Paso itself, but some of the surrounding communities, jobs that can be created through some of these areas as well. So there's a real long-range potential for the area around El Paso, and of course El Paso and Ciudad Juarez itself. What's the next step? What are we looking at from here?
Well, we continue to do the work every day to help facilitate projects. We have to facilitate what other people are doing. We're not trying to run museums or do these things ourselves. We're trying to provide technical assistance and facilitate the good works of so many good people out there, and then bring it all together to tell this story. So what's next is we'll continue that. We started in June a small grants program where we'll provide funding up to $2,500 for entities in this area who will develop grants to look at, and ideas to look at, historic preservation projects, heritage tourism projects, and public education projects. These can be exhibits, wayside signage, things that are going to facilitate residents and tourists getting from point A to point B, and when they get to a place, having something there that interprets and becomes part of this story we're trying to tell. So we've developed that. We'll do another round of those small, what we call a small grant program, in December. We continue to develop our booklets. And we continue to try to connect with those groups that we can connect with and try to facilitate the good work that they're trying to do.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and telling us all about this today. If people are interested in more information, they can contact you through the El Paso Community Foundation. And we want to thank you for spending some time with us today and talking about some of these sites. And we want to thank you as well for joining us today on Along the Rio Grande, and we hope to see you all at our next program.